This is a VR to Craggy Brook Witchery's video about the criteria they use when picking out a new deck. And I will add their video to the cards and to the description. It's a really interesting set of questions and criteria they use. And I was excited to do a VR to this because I have been kind of collecting decks, I would say, for about 5 years now. I have 112 decks in total. So that's all my tarot, oracle, Lenormand, and playing cards. I will put a link to my decks playlist. So if you'd like to see my full collection, you can go see my collection as it stands right now as of recording this video. And I do have rules for myself around purchases. And I didn't in the beginning necessarily. I didn't totally understand with my first few decks what I wanted and who I was as a reader and my style and what I was looking for, but I know that now. Now that I've collected so many decks, I have a sense of what I really want. So besides just knowing better what I really want, I also do have some rules in place for myself because I really only want to spend my money on decks that I will actually use. I have limited space to store my decks, and I'm not going to make more space for them. I have some concerns about overconsumerism for myself. The collection I have now more than suits my needs, and so I'm not really buying a whole lot of decks anymore. I like that I can put some criteria in place and to make some decisions to make good decisions for myself. The biggest years of my collecting were 2022 and 2023, and buying all those decks really taught me what I like. So now that I know that, I can pay attention to those things and make really good choices for myself. In general, I am not buying oracle decks anymore. I'm really focusing on tarot. I have a nice oracle collection, and for the frequency I use an oracle deck, I think I have pretty much everything I need. So I will enjoy looking at oracle decks, but I always remind myself, like, you're not going to use it. You're likely not going to use it. But I will talk about some of those criteria that I have specifically for oracles in this video, even though I'm not really buying them anymore. All right, let's get into it. The first question I ask myself when I'm looking at a new deck is, do I like the art? If I don't like the art, I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to enjoy using it. I love having a little art gallery in my hand. It is just such a delight to hold these cards and to look at the art and to experience an artist's interpretation of these archetypes and the history of this deck, to think about them spiritually, physical world, relationships, to just see how they might apply in different ways. I love looking at the way these gorgeous pieces of art affect me, that when I work with them, I see these cards differently depending on the art. So these are just a small selection of some of my favorite works of art in my collection, but that is my number one question. Do I like the art? The second question I ask myself is the art AI? If it's made with AI, I don't want it. I'm not going to spend my money on it. I want to spend my money supporting real people, real humans who made this gorgeous art, who wrote these amazing guidebooks, who took the time to have a human interpretation of these cards. So if the deck was made with AI, I am not interested, and I can just cross it right off my list. I think publishers have a real opportunity here to republish some vintage decks. And one of the things I love to do is pick out decks that are older, like this one. This is the Dreaming Way. And it was made before generative AI imaging was very popular and available to people. And so I feel very confident buying things like this. So older decks are really a pleasure to buy at this point because I have no suspicion that they're AI. Question number 3 is whether or not the art has interpretations that make sense to me. Do they offer me something new? Do they offer me an alternative perspective on a card? So for example, this is the Fifth Spirit, and one of the things I love about it are essentially the pips. The numbered minors have no humans in them, but they do have scenes, and they are such an amazing interpretation of the meaning of those cards. Let me find another one. Here's another one. So you can see this is Three of Cups, which is usually interpreted as friendship or community, often depicted with women in the image. But here we just have a teapot, a shared cup of tea, some cookies, and a braid across the top. Here's our Nine of Pentacles, which is often a woman standing in a garden. And here we just have this beautiful table setting with, multiple courses, so much food, so much abundance. So decks like this one, like the Fifth Spirit, offer me a new perspective. They bring the tarot into the modern world, which I really like, and they offer me something new. Now, I have bought decks where the interpretations don't actually make very much sense for me, and those have been harder to read with. I still appreciate that it's a different perspective, but I do try to make sure I look at all the cards before I buy. At this point, I have so many RWS-based decks and decks that have similar interpretations that I really appreciate something like the Fifth Spirit that can show me something new. If a deck is essentially the same as the RWS, I will most likely pass it up at this point. Question 4, which is actually a question that's getting more and more important to me, is can I shuffle the deck? Can I work with it? If I can't shuffle it, then I'm going to be fighting it. And if I have to fight that deck, I'm going to reach for it a lot less. And at this point, I don't want to spend my money on something that I'm reaching for pretty infrequently. This was one of the decks that taught me how I cannot handle rose petal finish. This is Poesis, and I adore this deck. It is an absolute work of genius. This is an oracle deck, and I love reading with it, but the cards stick together. So I do not buy rose petal decks anymore. It doesn't matter how much I love them because it's going to frustrate me to work with them, and so I don't buy them. I also struggle with really large decks, and that's both the size of the cards themselves and the thickness of the cardstock. So this deck is a pretty standard size, I think maybe even just a little bit shorter, but it is so thick, and with my hands, with the size of my hands, this is a difficult deck for me to handle. I actually also struggle with this, even though it is one of my very favorite decks. It's this kind of cardboardy cardstock, and so it makes it really thick. And so I do, at this point, because I love my collection, at this point I can be pretty picky about cardstock and the size of the deck, simply because I won't reach for the deck as much. Not that I won't ever reach for it, but just not as much. Some of my very favorite decks taught me about my issues with cardstock. This is Kai Tarot Love, and it's more of an oracle size, which again, just for my hands, makes it a little bit harder to deal with. This is about as big as I should go. And of course, my criteria may not be yours at all, and so the cardstock might not affect you in any way, but for me, it's actually a really big thing. Like I said, I love my collection, and so I don't need to be purchasing more decks that are going to be hard for me to work with. But there are always exceptions to a rule. I adore this deck, and it doesn't matter that it's a little too big for me. I love it. So I have it and I keep it, but it also taught me to be careful of card size. These two decks, though I love them, taught me that square cards are not for me. I don't know what it is, but I struggle to handle them. This is a fantastic oracle, reads like a dream, linen cardstock. It's really wonderful to work with, but I struggle with square cards. And same with my Dark Days. It's another square deck, which I adore the art, and I get amazing readings from it. But I know because of these two decks that square is just hard for me. And so that's another thing that I will kind of avoid. So again, question 4 is, can I shuffle it? Can I work with it the way I want to work with it? Like, I like to fan my cards out and choose that way. So if I can't fan it because it's rose petal, If I can't shuffle it the way I want to shuffle it because it's square or too big or too cardboardy or I can't hold it. Ooh, a little slippy there. Those are things that I will take into consideration before I buy a deck. Question 5 is, will I read with it? So not can I physically work with it, but can I do a reading with it? And I would say the only reason I know the answer to this question now is because I have bought so many decks and because I've done so many readings with them. I know myself well enough now that I can sort of tell better now than I used to be able to tell which decks I can read with and which ones I can't. Some of the things I take into consideration are if it's collage. I love collage art. I am so drawn to collage decks. I actually have quite a few, but I know now that I really struggle to read with them. So I will admire collage decks, but I will not buy them. More minimalist decks. Things, honestly, like this one, I picked this as an example. It feels a little minimalist. I know it's odd to say. I actually don't know the name of this style or this approach, but I need more depth, I guess. So I love this deck. I think it's really fun to look at, but I still struggle to read with it. It just feels kind of flat. Maybe minimalist isn't the right word. It's more like flatter, like more vector images. Again, I like how they look, but I know I'm not going to get great readings with them. Which again, all of this is personal. So I invite you to mention that you have opposite opinions about this than I do. Another thing I look for is whether the cards have titles. These do not. They have symbols for queen. The larger size is a major or a major. The smaller size Roman numeral is a minor, you see. High priestess because it's 2. 2 of cups because it's a small 2. Decks like this, I know now I struggle to read with. I do not want to have to stop in the middle of a reading to try to make sense of what I'm seeing. So it just takes me out of the reading. So I'm very careful to check whether the cards have titles and how they're written, how the creator has decided to kind of display them. Along with that, let me get an example. Along those same lines with the titles being labeled on there, I also look to see whether anything has been renamed. Typical renamings are suits, courts, and majors. It's not often that they're all renamed in a deck, but some of those will be renamed. Let me show you some examples. In Tarot of Oneness, we have alternate titles for the courts. In this deck, the suits are not renamed, and most of the majors are the same name. However, there is one of the majors. Judgment is renamed to Awakening. So I will always look for renamings, but this is not confusing to me. That makes a lot of sense to rename Judgment Awakening. I can also see the number, and the art is very clear to me what card that is. I'm just looking for, do I have them all? Oh, I've got enough examples. So the courts are renamed though. Pages are inspiration. Knights are action. And don't be confused, there are actually 4 knights in this deck. I just didn't grab them. Queens are spirit. And kings are embodiment. Those are pretty clear to me. So I don't really struggle to read with this deck. Sometimes I get the embodiment and the spirit a little bit mixed up because I feel like queens are such embodied energies, but this is also a deck I only read with for myself, and so it's okay if I need to pause and remember which one is which. I'm not going to show you all of these, but it's just to say I do have decks where things are renamed, and some of those are very easy to use, and others I need to sort of rememorize this deck's approach to the court cards because they don't have a lot of information in the art. And then this one, it's only just one thing is renamed in the courts, but the suits are renamed. However, they make good sense to me. But it has at least taught me that I'm not in love with the renamings. And so if I'm looking at a new deck, I check to see the renamings and whether it's going to work for me. Another thing I look at is the pips. Are they illustrated? Are they more traditional pips? What am I getting out of my numbered minors? At this point, I feel like I have enough decks like these two and others with just pippish, straight up pips, that I'm not really looking for new ones. I don't love reading with them as much as I like fully illustrated decks. I still do like them and I read with them quite frequently, but I have enough of these now that I'm not looking for more. So unless the deck really has something very, very special to offer to override this rule for myself, I'm not buying new decks that have just kind of plain pips instead of illustrated ones. Another question I ask myself is if the deck is deities, and deities are going to be a no for me, so that's an easy one to cross off. And then one quick note about my oracle decks. I know I said that I'm not buying new oracles, but I want to throw this in there. These are both sort of plant-based oracles. This is Dirt Gems, and this is Hedgewitch Botanical, I think. And I think they're a really good example of the oracle decks that I would rather buy. So this one has the name of the plant, but there's no other keyword on it. So in order to use it, I either need to memorize the system, I need to memorize the guidebook or refer to the guidebook during my readings, or I need to just kind of let go of all that and only go with the art and the associations I can come up with the art. Okay, so this is one style of oracle where the titles don't really mean anything to me. Another style of oracle, this one also has the name of the plant, but it's also included a very expansive keyword that I can use in my readings. Oracles like this work better for me. I don't want to learn a brand new system. I like the art. I like the keywords. They are great in a reading to throw in with some tarot, but if I have to memorize another system or another guidebook, I'm just not going to do it. Now, I broke the rule on Dirt Gems because I am so in love with this deck, so I broke my own rule to get this, and I'm just doing my best to muddle my way through because I'm just unbelievably taken with this art, and I think it's a gorgeous deck, and the guidebook is fabulous. So I do break my own rules sometimes, but for the most part, I'm not buying decks, oracle decks, where the keyword is not this more sort of expansive keyword that I can use right away in a reading. Question 6 is whether or not I already have something similar. So I will go into my collection and look for something that I already have that's similar to the deck I have my eye on. And then I will also think about whether I actually like using the one that's in my current collection. So for example, this is the Rainbow Tarot, which I love. And I have had my eye on the Magic Tarot by Fournier, but there's something about the Magic Tarot that I really feel like this one fits in the same space. I don't, in general, reach for kind of my more cartoony, cutesy decks, and this one is just enough outside of like cartoony that I really, really love it. I love the wildness of the colors. But there's something about the Magic Tarot and this one that feel very similar to me. And so I just have been putting off getting the Magic Tarot, even though I know I'll like it. And I would like the cardstock. I love Fournier decks. But I just go shopping in my own collection first before I feel like I need to go get something new. I also had an instance, there was a Kickstarter with this gorgeous deck. And I don't even remember the name of it, but it was essentially like a Marseille style. So, historical. It had larger cards, which already I'm like, oh, do I get it? Do I not? And then I started thinking about that I already had some historical decks in my collection and that I don't reach for them as much as I reach for more modern decks. So it made it easier to say no to that Kickstarter because even though it was gorgeous, even though I would love taking it out to look at it, I knew I wasn't going to read with it because I already had something similar that I wasn't reading with very much. Now on the other side, I may someday decide to get the Magic Tarot because I like reading with the Rainbow Tarot so much. Like clearly I would like reading with that one too. But for now, I think I'm just good with this one and I don't need to have another deck. And if I don't have anything in my collection, then that's a real plus for me. If there's nothing already on my shelf that looks like the deck that I'm eyeing, then that makes me lean towards wanting to buy it for sure. Question 7 is, does the deck represent a diversity of human identity? I have plenty of decks that are Eurocentric heteronormative decks, and so I'm always on the lookout for things that show me a world that I actually live in. The Fifth Spirit is one of the most amazingly representative decks I have in my collection and that I've ever seen. This deck has diversity of age, body size, ability and disability, gender, race, sexuality. It just is so beautifully representative of the world I live in, and it's a major reason I love it. Now, I bought the Ehrenberg on pre-order. I was so excited, and I hadn't seen more than just a couple images of it, but it ticked a lot of my boxes. It was a new perspective. It was beautiful art. It had titles. It was all the things I loved. And then when I got it and I saw that there was nothing but young white people, I don't know. I found it disappointing that a modern deck had not addressed that, even though it's a deck that is meant to look like Pamela Coleman Smith's art, right? We're seeing scenes out of her art. I don't know, just a deck that's made in modern times. I'm not sure why we would need to stick with, all white people in a deck. That's not, I still use it, but I just had that moment of disappointment, and it made me realize I should kind of double check and make sure that the decks I'm buying suit my needs a little bit better than that. Question 8 is it a system I'm familiar with? So, for example, I have the Thoth deck because I really felt like it was important to have in my collection. This is a major deck that has had a huge impact on a lot of readers and on tarot in general, and so I wanted it in my collection. However, I don't want to learn a new system right now. So I love the art. I love this art. I think Lady Frida Harris was a genius. But I'm not going to learn a new system right now. So if I see a deck that I love, if it's passing all my other questions, if it's everything I've wanted, otherwise, if it's a new system, I'm not going to get it. I think that's very similar to how I feel about Oracle decks, where I have to memorize a guidebook in order to use it. I'm not in a place to do that right now. I might in the future, but similarly, different types of tarot that are very different, where there's a bunch of extra cards, is it Minchiati and stuff like that. I'm not all that interested in those decks right now. I'm also not interested in learning Kipper. I've kind of set aside my Lenormand studies for now, things like that. Right now, I'm just very interested in continuing to dive deeper and deeper and deeper into systems I already know. My last 2 questions, I don't have any example decks to show you about them, so I'm just going to show you the lovely Pope Tarot while I chat. Question 9 is, can I watch a full flip through anywhere? Can I see all the pictures of the cards somewhere? If not, I'm going to be cautious. It's kind of one of the reasons that I have stopped taking advantage of pre-orders, because I often can't see a full flip through. But if I can, then that would maybe change my mind. But sometimes I see a deck and I only see a few of the cards, and then I don't notice that their suits are renamed or the courts are renamed, right? I don't notice that it's not representing a full diverse humanity. So unless I can see all of the cards, I'm generally going to say no until I can see all the cards. Because like I said, I am very happy with the decks I have. They meet my needs. I'm always open to new decks because I love adding new art, new interpretations to my collection, to my library. But that does mean that I can be picky, and I like to be picky. So if I can't see all of the cards, I'm gonna wait until I can. Criteria 10, not really a question. Actually, not really a criteria. But one of the things I've started doing is that I wait at least 48 hours before I buy something. Sometimes much, much longer. But I know that sometimes I get swept away in the hype, or I see a few cards and I get so excited about it that I buy the deck, and I have too many decks that I did that with, and I don't really read with them anymore. If I buy a deck on impulse, it is more likely to spend most of its time on the shelf and not much time on my reading table. So I do everything I can to avoid impulse purchases at this point. The original video that this is a VR to had 11 questions. I cannot come up with 11. Now I know that some of my questions actually had like sub questions in them, but so I will just say for my 11th thing, it's something I don't really care about, and that is the guidebook. I don't really care unless it is art that's way outside of something that I can even recognize the general RWS system in. Is this offensive? I'm probably not going to read the guidebook. I love a deck that I can just use right out of the box. So I will dip into the guidebook, but I'm not really a read it cover to cover type person. I have a handful of decks that I intend to read the guidebook because I need to study them because they're outside of the system, or the interpretation is so different, or I just know there is so much depth in the guidebook. But a guidebook is never going to be a deal breaker for me. So if it doesn't have a guidebook, don't care. I'll just get it anyway if it meets all my other needs. If it has a very expensive guidebook that I have to buy separately, I probably won't buy the guidebook. So anyway, that's how I sneak in my 11th thing, something I don't really care about. If you decide to do a VR to this, I would love to see it. I think it's really interesting to think about and learn about what other readers see in their decks and how they decide to buy or not buy them. A lot of my criteria actually comes from learning about what other people like and don't, in addition to my experience with buying my many decks. So I'd love to have more people join in and discuss their criteria. Like this video if you liked it. Please follow if you enjoy tarot content that's about readings and self-reflection and empowerment, transforming ourselves and our world through tarot. And thanks for stopping by.